She was not a warship, nor a vessel of grand luxury. The Andes was a working ship, stout, purposeful, and built to carry goods across the Caribbean Sea. Her steel hull was painted a weathered black, streaked with rust that trailed like tears down her sides. And in the early months of 1905, she cut across the waves like a slow-moving shadow. Her captain, whose name history has almost lost, was a man of order and reputation. A man said to have salt water for blood and eyes as sharp as the horizon's edge. Crewmen spoke of him with a mix of respect and quiet fear, not because he was cruel, but because he carried a certain stillness, as though he knew storms before the clouds ever formed. On that fateful voyage, the Andes left port carrying a hold full of cargo meant for the islands, crates of flour, salted meat, barrels of molasses, and something else, something never listed in the official logs. Some swore it was gunpowder. Others whispered of gold hidden in false-bottomed crates. But the most persistent rumor spoke of a shipment of illegal explosives, meant for revolutionaries somewhere across the sea. The crew had grown restless. The tropical heat pressed down on the decks, turning each shift into a trial of endurance. Below, in the airless belly of the ship, the smell of oil, sweat, and something acrid lingered, sharp enough to sting the back of the throat. For weeks, the Andes pushed on, the steady beat of her engines thudding like a giant's heart. By day, the waters glittered under the sun. By night, the sea became a black expanse, broken only by the slow sweep of the stars above and the pale light of the ship's lamps. But something in the air began to change. Small things, at first. A hatch that wouldn't stay shut. Tools gone missing from the engine room. The faint scent of smoke, dismissed as a trick of the mind. The captain grew quieter with each passing day. His logbook entries became shorter, tighter, as though the pen in his hand weighed 100 pounds. And though no one dared ask, the crew knew he felt it too, that unshakable sense that the Andes was carrying more than just cargo. She was carrying a fate. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in the still, dark waters of Deep Bay, that fate was waiting for her. The morning of the fire began like any other. The sea was calm, the sunlight pale, and the smell of salt carried lazily across the deck. The crew went about their duties, coiling rope, checking rigging, swabbing the boards slick with early dew. But in the dark belly of the Andes, trouble had already begun. At first, it was nothing more than a thin ribbon of smoke curling upward through the cracks in the deck boards, so faint it could be mistaken for steam from the boilers. The heat below grew by the hour, clinging to the skin like a fever. Some of the men spoke of hearing muffled pops, wood splitting, or perhaps something else. The engineer swore he smelled burning canvas. The captain, summoned from his quarters, descended into the cargo hold. When he returned, his face was pale, his jaw set in a grim line. No one ever knew exactly what he saw down there. Some claimed it was a crate blown open, its contents, black powder, spilling across the floor. Others said he found barrels sweating oil, their metal bands glowing faintly from the heat. He gave no explanation, only orders. Clear the deck, prepare the lifeboats, and keep your mouth shut. But by then, the fire was alive. It began deep within the heart of the ship, hidden beneath planks and tarps, feeding on oil, wood, and whatever secret cargo was tucked away. The smoke thickened until the air burned the throat and eyes. Then came the first blast. It was not large enough to tear the hull, but it was enough to shake the Andes from bow to stern. Men stumbled across the deck, some clutching their ears, others shouting over the rising roar from below. The heat radiating from the hold was so intense the iron fittings on the hatch began to glow. The captain's voice cut through the chaos like a whip crack. All hands, abandon ship. The crew scrambled, lowering lifeboats into the rolling sea as the fire burst upward in a plume of black and orange. Barrels exploded, sending splinters and shards of metal screaming through the air. Some men leapt straight into the water, the hiss of steam swallowing their cries. And yet, through all of it, the captain did not leave his post. He stood on the deck, one hand on the wheel, as if he could somehow steer the burning vessel away from the rocks and into deeper waters. The flames painted his face in flickering gold and shadow. Smoke curled around him like a shroud. The last the men saw of him, he was still there, eyes fixed on the horizon, as the inferno consumed the bridge. Within minutes, the Andes was gone from sight, swallowed by the waters of Deep Bay. But not everything that sank with her stayed beneath the surface. When the Andes finally slipped beneath the waves, it was not with the clean grace of a ship surrendering to the sea. It went down thrashing, groaning, and tearing itself apart. The bay churned with black smoke that bled into the horizon. The mast sagged like dying limbs, the rigging hissing as the fire met the saltwater spray. Flames roared even as the ocean tried to smother them, clinging stubbornly to the tarred ropes and splintered planks. The crew, those who had made it to the lifeboats, could do nothing but watch. The heat on their faces was almost unbearable, even from a distance. Each man knew there was no turning back, no way to reclaim the cargo, the vessel, or the captain. The bow tilted downward first, dragging the rest of the ship with it. The great steel hull groaned as the pressure built, rivets snapping like brittle bones. Water poured into the gaping wounds in her side, rushing through corridors, swallowing cabins, snuffing out the last pockets of fire in bursts of steam. And still, the wheelhouse clung to the surface for a few more defiant seconds. Through the veil of smoke, some swore they saw him, the captain, still gripping the wheel as though the sea itself would have to pry it from his hands. No fear, no desperation, just a terrible, unyielding resolve. Then, with a final shudder, the stern lifted high, the screws glistening briefly in the light, before the weight of the deep claimed her. She vanished in a boil of bubbles, leaving behind a patch of slick, oil-streaked water and the acrid taste of smoke on the wind. The lifeboats drifted in silence for a long time. No one spoke of what they had seen. No one dared to speak of what they felt, the sudden chill that had swept over the bay as the last scrap of the Andes disappeared into the depths. Below, the ship came to rest on the sandy floor of Deep Bay, her hull cracked open like a wounded animal. The water was still warm from the fire, curling in shimmering waves above her. Some of the cargo had spilled free, littering the seabed with half-charred crates, broken barrels, and jagged debris. Within the captain's quarters, untouched by salvage or time, the wheel remained. And beside it, in the shadows, something waited. Something that had no intention of leaving. The wreck should have been left to rot in silence, a grave hidden beneath the still waters of Deep Bay. But silence has a way of breaking. It began with the fishermen. Men who knew the moods of the sea, who could read the color of the water and the curl of the clouds like scripture. They spoke in hushed voices of an unease in the bay, how the wind would die without warning, leaving the air heavy and still. How their nets would snag on something deep below, something that felt like steel but moved. Then came the divers. In the early years, they were salvagers, searching for anything of value among the wreckage. They never found the rumored gold or explosives, but they always found the wheelhouse, and they never lingered there. Every one of them told the same story, the feeling of being watched, of something standing just out of sight in the doorway. One diver swore he saw a shadowed figure gripping the wheel, its head turning toward him as if in slow recognition. He surfaced so fast he nearly drowned himself in the process. Local law began to twist the facts. Some said the captain refused to abandon his ship not out of bravery, but because he had made a bargain, an oath to guard whatever secret cargo the Andes carried. And when the sea claimed him, so did the oath. They began to call it the captain's curse. If you swam too close to the wreck without offering respect, without speaking aloud your reason for being there, you risked his attention. Sometimes it was only a whisper in the bubbles escaping your mask. Other times, it was far worse, your equipment failing in calm water, your body dragged by unseen hands toward the open door of the wheelhouse. The fishermen had their own warning: never cross Deep Bay at night. Not when the water is still, and the moon paints a silver road across its surface. For it's then that a single light appears below, a ghostly lamp burning in the drowned wheelhouse. Those who follow it say it leads them in slow circles, pulling them toward the center of the bay, toward the grave where the captain waits. And if you look down into that dark water long enough, sometimes he looks back. The man's name was Aaron Vance, a seasoned diver with over 15 years beneath his belt. He had explored wrecks from the Gulf to the Bahamas, threading his way through twisted hulls and collapsed bulkheads without a flicker of fear. But he had never dived Deep Bay before. He came for the challenge. The stories, he thought, were nothing more than local color, tall tales spun for tourists. He wanted photographs, proof of how myths grow out of nothing but saltwater and shadows. The day was perfect for it. The water was calm, the sun strong enough to send golden shafts piercing through the bay. He strapped on his gear, checked his gauges twice, and slipped beneath the surface. At first, the descent was serene. Small fish darted between strands of swaying seagrass. The water cooled as he went deeper, the sunlight dimming to a greenish haze. Then the shape appeared, dark and massive below, the bones of the Andes lying at rest on the sandy floor. Aaron moved toward the wheelhouse. His light cut through the murk, revealing rusted railings and the torn mouths of open doors. The ship was quieter than any wreck he had visited. No curious fish, no shifting debris, only stillness. Inside the wheelhouse, the wheel itself stood in place, frozen mid-turn. A film of silt clung to every surface, disturbed only by his passing. He raised his camera, framed the shot. That's when the water changed. It wasn't movement, more like a presence, a pressure, as if the bay itself had decided to notice him. The temperature dropped so fast his breath fogged the inside of his mask. Something flickered at the edge of his light beam, just outside the doorway. He turned. There, half hidden in shadow, was a figure. Not a fish, not another diver. Tall, broad-shouldered, the outline of a man in an old-style coat, the kind a captain might wear. His head tilted slowly, and though Aaron could see no face, he felt the weight of his gaze press into him. The water around him thickened. His regulator hissed unevenly. Every instinct screamed at him to swim, to get out, but his limbs felt heavy, as if anchored. Then the figure moved, not toward him, but toward the wheel, placing its hands upon it, just as the captain had the day the ship sank. Aaron's vision darkened at the edges. In that darkness, he heard it, a low, steady voice, impossible to hear through water, yet they're all the same. You shouldn't be here. Aaron bolted. He kicked for the surface, the light above him feeling miles away. When he broke through, gasping in the sunlight, his friends on the boat said he was white as chalk and shaking like a man in the grip of fever. He never dived again. By day, Deep Bay is a picture of calm beauty. Tourists swim in its warm shallows, children splash at the shore, and the distant shape of the Andes lies invisible beneath the surface, just another shadow among the reefs. But at night, the bay changes. The locals know it. Fishermen pack their gear before sunset. Even the most daring swimmers leave the water well before dark. For when the sun dips below the horizon and the first stars rise, the surface of Deep Bay becomes a mirror, black, glassy, and silent. It's in that silence the stories take root. Some speak of a single light appearing far out in the center of the bay, pale, yellowish, swaying gently as if hanging from a lantern. Others tell of hearing voices drift across the still water, not carried by wind, but rising from below, as though someone was speaking from the drowned deck of the ship. And always, the stories circle back to him. The captain, the man who would not abandon his post, who sank with his hands still gripping the wheel. Some believe he is still there, guarding the wreck like a sentinel. Others think he is searching, for the crew who left him, for the cargo he swore to protect, or perhaps for anyone foolish enough to join him in his eternal watch. On rare nights, when the moon is high and the tide is low, people claim you can see more than just the light. They say a figure rises slowly toward the surface, just enough for his pale, sea-bleached face to break the water. No breath, no words, only the cold certainty that he's seen you, and that he remembers. The next morning, the bay will be calm again. The sunlight will glint off the water, erasing the memory of what happened in the dark. But the feeling will remain, a weight in the chest, a chill at the base of the spine. And somewhere, in the drowned silence far below, the captain will still be waiting, hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the next soul to drift too close. Because the Andes is not just a wreck. It is a grave. And some graves do not stay closed.
Thank you for hanging around until the end of our tale. Every view is appreciated. If you have enjoyed it, please hit that like button and considering commenting and subscribing.